In a forgotten corner of history, where no map could draw borders and no king could proclaim his rule, there stretched an endless, boundless steppe, while the sky pressed down like an endless dome upon the people. The sea of grass that filled the horizon told a different story each hour of the day. By day, horses galloped beneath the scorching sun, and by night, under the pale glow of the moon, the small fires of the tribes shone like distant stars. The pulse of a silent world beat slow and steady. But behind this calm, something was hidden. Even time itself, without realizing it, was witnessing the birth of a new power in the heart of the steppe. It had no name yet. No one dared whisper the word empire.
Yet a destiny was moving quietly within the shadows. Children born into poverty, loneliness, and tribal conflict, young warriors raised amid harsh winters and cutting winds, were writing the first pages of a story that would one day stretch to the farthest continents on Earth. This is the story of the rise of the Mongols. A lone mother's struggle, the distrust between scattered tribes, hooves racing the storm, and a people shaped in the deep silence of the steppe. There are no palaces in this tale, no stone walls, no throne rooms, no golden ornaments. Only the wind, the earth, and the heavy burden of survival.
Yet beneath that burden, one of the greatest empires in history would be born. Now close your eyes, listen to the voice of the wind, and let us walk together into the dark night of the steppe, where a great power quietly began to sprout. With silent steps, we begin the story of the rise of the Mongols.
Chapter 1. The Endless Silence of the Steppe. In the quiet of distant lands, time seemed almost to stand still. The steppes of Central Asia stretched endlessly, covered in grasses that swayed like a silent sea under the gentle caress of the wind. The sky was boundless. By day, the sun bathed the land in golden light, and by evening, it slowly disappeared behind a crimson veil. At night, the moon illuminated the silence of the steppe like a distant lighthouse. Every stone, every blade of grass, every whisper of the wind seemed to tell a secret.
No tribe had yet united. Each struggled to survive by the fire of their own small tent. In a sense, the steppe was like a slowly flowing river, seemingly motionless, yet with a powerful current beneath the surface. This current quietly carried the seeds of a force that would one day shape the destiny of history. There were hostilities between tribes, but these were mostly silent conflicts. Sometimes an argument, sometimes a mutual threat. There were no great wars yet. Only the balance between humans, animals, and nature existed. Horses grazed quietly, children ran about inside tents as if playing, and the elders gazed at the sky, counting the stars. Every life played its own rhythm, its own silent melody.
Surviving on the steppe was difficult. The winters were long, harsh, and cold. The summers short and hot. Rain merged with the earth, creating mud and puddles that made paths nearly impassable. The people had to yield to these conditions, for the power of wind and sun was far greater than that of humans. Yet the steppe was silent.
And at the same time, it was a place of learning. Youngsters learned to ride horses, practiced with bow and arrow, studied the animals, and quietly discovered which plants were edible. Every step was a lesson, every breath a reminder. To survive on these lands, patience is more important than strength.
And it was in this very silence that a child was born. His name would be Temujin. No one yet knew he would become a great leader. No one could have predicted he would found an empire. But the steppe, quietly and deeply, was preparing this child for the future. Smoke rising from the tents, the faint crackle of fires, the scent of grass carried by the wind, all combined to form a melody, as if the steppe itself was telling its legend in silence. And anyone who listened to this melody would, for a time, exist outside of time. For this silence touched not only the eyes, but the very depths of the soul. As the sun slowly sank below the horizon, the sky darkened, and the first stars appeared. Inside the tents, people gradually gathered around the fires, quietly shaking off the day's fatigue. The breaths of the horses, the soft rustle of the wind, and the distant call of an owl were the only sounds on the steppe. And in this silence, the unknown and quiet roots of one of history's greatest empires were taking shape.
Nothing had begun yet, but the sound of the wind, the rustling of the grass, and the deep silence of the steppe whispered the first sentences of a story. This was the first breath of the founding story of the Mongols. And now we will listen to this silence and follow its footsteps.
Chapter 2: The world into which Temujin was born and the tribes. The steppe had always been a silent teacher throughout history. The wind gently swept over the grasses. The scent of the earth spoke of time's slow passage, and every stone, every hillock held the stories of the past and the future.
In the early 1160s, in the vast steppes of Central Asia, a small tribe lived quietly. No one yet knew that from this tribe would come a child who would change the destiny of the steppe. This child would be named Temujin. Tribes were often hostile to one another, sometimes curiosity, sometimes petty ambition, sometimes silent conflicts over land would arise. Yet the silence of the steppe enveloped everything like a soothing blanket, softening every quarrel, gradually making even the anger between tribes fade. Each tribe tried to survive by the fire of its own small tent. Elders gave advice, youths rode horses, and children ran among the grasses, playing quietly.
The tribe into which Temujin was born was not very different from the others. Life flowed slowly, but the hardships were great. Winters were long and merciless. Snow merged with the earth for months, making paths impassable. At times it was so cold that even the fires inside the tents were insufficient, and people huddled together to warm their hands and feet. Summers, though short, were hot, drying the grasses across the wide plains scorched by the wind, making it hard for animals to find water. The steppe was, in a sense, a silent teacher that demanded patience and resilience from its people.
Temujin's family struggled to survive in this harsh world. His father, Yesige, was a minor leader within the tribe, but he was also a target for enemy clans. In his youth, Yesige had been brave and strong, skilled at riding horses and using bow and arrow. However, the harsh realities of nomadic life would one day bring him face to face with death. When Temujin was still a small child, his father died after being poisoned during a dispute. Silence and fear settled over the family. Temujin was left alone with his mother, Hoelun,
on the snow-covered steppe. The mother fought a quiet struggle to keep her children alive. She gathered grass during the day, tended to the animals, and guarded the tent through the night. Every step she took was slow, careful, and silent, for the steppe was full of both friend and foe.
Relations between tribes, from the outside, appeared complex and incomprehensible. Sometimes, one tribe would attack another. Sometimes, silent agreements were made. Trade, marriages, and blood ties determined the quiet balance of power. The wind carried these balances too, establishing a silent communication across the steppe. Young Temujin grew up amidst all this chaos. He rode horses, practiced with bow and arrow, studied animals, and gradually discovered which plants were edible. Every day, he learned a small lesson in the harsh conditions of the steppe: patience, vigilance, and strategy. Every event he witnessed in childhood quietly accumulated in the mind of a future great leader.
The silence of the steppe was also a place of learning. Distant sounds carried by the wind seemed to whisper the movements of faraway tribes into Temujin's ears. Observing the behavior of animals, noticing when people woke in the morning, gazing at the night sky. All of this quietly planted the seeds of his leadership. The way of life of the tribes, their social structures, and the unique rhythm of the steppe drew a map in Temujin's mind. Every tent, every fire, every path symbolized the building blocks of a future great empire. The young Temujin, unaware, instinctively observed and learned. And at that very moment, the small boy's eyes caught the distant horizon of the steppe, listening to the silent melodies carried by the wind. It was as if the steppe whispered a secret to him. You were born a lonely child, but one day these lands will carve your name into history. Every day, every hour, every breath quietly accumulated strength in Temujin's mind. As night gradually fell, smoke rose above the fires, the wind caressed the grasses, and the sky filled with stars. Little Temujin sat quietly at the edge of the tent, listening to the sound of the wind. And in this silence, he continued to learn how to endure life's harsh and long roads, patience, strategy, and leadership. In this silent and profound world of the steppe, a small child was growing. And very soon, this silence would whisper the first steps of one of the greatest empires in the world.
Chapter 3: Yasuge's Death and the Family's Abandonment. The steppes of Central Asia awoke to a cold and silent morning. The sun slowly rose behind the horizon, scattering its reddish light over the snow-covered hills. Smoke rose from the small tents, blending into the sky like a thin veil, drifting upward without disturbing the quiet of the steppe, carrying faint scents on the wind.
Inside Yasuge's tent, however, the silence was deeper. The aging leader quietly felt his own fate as the young and curious eyes of the tribe watched him. Children played, youths prepared for hunting, and women tended to their morning chores. But this morning was different. Yasuge's breaths had grown heavy, the lines on his face deepened. The harsh winds of the steppes seemed to whisper a gentle warning of his final days. Yasuge was respected as a leader within the tribe, yet his enemies quietly and cunningly plotted, waiting for his death. One day, after disputes and silent grudges, poison was given that ended Yasuge's life. The tribe noticed nothing. The steppe silently continued in its own flow.
Yasuge's death was a profound shock for young Temujin and his mother, Hoilun.
The small boy's eyes tried to understand as he gazed upon his father's lifeless body. But the rules of the steppe were harsh. Pain, loss, and solitude were inevitable parts of survival. Hoylun stepped out of the tent to protect her children. The wind carried dust mixed with snow, emphasizing the vastness of the steppe. Silently, she gathered her children close, striving to shield them from hunger and cold. Every step pressed into the harsh soil of the steppe. Every breath whispered the first lessons to a future great leader.
After Yasuge's death, the tribe remained as a small, lonely group. Old friends quietly withdrew. Some pursued their own interests. Others distanced themselves out of mistrust. Hulin and her children were abandoned and alone. At night, as they sat quietly inside the tent, the rustle of the wind and the distant sounds of other tribes carried the complex and silent melodies of the steppe. Young Temujin's mind tried to draw lessons from this chaos. He realized that life was harsh, that people could be both friends and foes, and that the steppe would never forgive anyone. Each night, lying quietly in the tent, the melody of the wind taught him patience and resilience.
The family's solitude became a source of strength deep within the steppe. Hoylun acted like a silent leader, carefully planning every move to protect her children. Little Temujin grew up amidst these hardships, quietly gaining the skills that would one day make him a great leader. As days passed, the struggle against hunger and cold tested the family's patience and endurance. Each morning, the sunrise appeared as a light of hope. Each evening, the silent and dark steppe forced them to find ways to survive.
And in this silence, something began to stir within Temujin. A power, a determination, a resolve. It had no name yet, no form. But the quiet of the steppe quietly planted the seeds of a leader within him. Yasuge's death and the abandonment of the tribe was a tragedy, but it was also the beginning of a destiny that would shape a small child's future. The harsh winds of the steppe, the rustling of grasses, and the quiet of the night had already begun to teach him survival, strategy, and the first lessons of becoming a Khan.
Another night passed in the silence of the steppe. The fire inside the tent slowly dimmed, the wind outside creating a faint melody. Little Temujin closed his eyes, breathed quietly, and perhaps unknowingly felt the first steps of one of the greatest empires in the making.
Chapter 4: Temujin's Youth and His Abduction into Slavery. The mornings on the steppe awoke with a light mist. As the sun slowly rose behind the horizon, snow-covered hills and vast pastures shimmered with shades of gold and silver. The wind silently caressed the grasses, and the quiet flow of a distant river echoed like the heartbeat of the steppe. Every breath carried the silent melody of the earth and sky. Every step felt the harsh yet gentle boundaries of the land.
Young Temujin had grown beyond childhood into a young man. The hardships of growing up had merged with the harsh face of the steppe. He had learned to ride horses, use bow and arrow, observe animals, read the direction of the wind, and interpret the signs of the sky. Every day, the steppe silently taught him lessons: patience, vigilance, strength, and strategy. Yet, despite his youth, he was slowly beginning to understand life's ruthless realities.
One day, Temujin and his brother Bektar were riding their horses across the wide plains of the steppe. The wind tossed their hair, and the hooves of the horses struck the ground with soft but determined beats. Each step was a rhythm, each breath a silent symphony spreading across the land. It seemed like an ordinary day, but the quiet whispers of destiny had already begun. Bektir and Temujin's tribe was still a target for enemy clans. The plans of their enemies worked slowly and cunningly, and Temujin was unaware. One night, as darkness fell, a distant tribe struck in silence. Tents were set ablaze, horses fled, and people ran in panic. Temujin and his brother hid in a corner of their tent, holding their breaths in silence.
Yet the silence could not prevent the enemies from sneaking in. Temujin was suddenly captured. When the cold wind hit his face, he opened his eyes to see unfamiliar faces surrounding him. He was alone, left to face the harshness of both the steppe and human cruelty. His abduction was a trial of his youth and innocence. Days and weeks passed. He was dragged across hills, valleys, rivers, and plains. Life as a slave was both a physical and mental struggle for Temujin, but the silent lessons of the steppe were still within him. Patience, observation, quiet strength. He tried to understand the meaning of every stone, every blade of grass, and the direction of the wind. Once again, the steppe whispered to him, "Survival depends not only on strength, but also on wit and patience."
In the tribe that had captured him, Temujin became a silent observer. He watched people's behavior, tried to understand their strategies, and recorded even the smallest details. Wars, disputes, everyday life. All of it became a repository of knowledge in his mind. The lessons he had learned on the steppe were now reinforced among humans. Each night, lying quietly in a corner of the tent, he gazed at the stars. The sky shone like a guide in the silence of the steppe. The stars carried quiet whispers from distant lands, each one shaped in Temujin's mind like a message from the future.
In the tribe that had captured him, hardship and cruelty often prevailed. Yet Temujin learned to protect himself, develop strategy, and take every step carefully. Understanding the wind, sensing the earth, observing the behavior of animals, all of this gave him silent strength. Over time, Temujin's small body was strengthened by the harshness of the steppe. But more importantly, his mind and spirit grew silently like a leader. Every pain, every hardship, every moment of solitude shaped the leader within him. And one day, he quietly escaped from the tribe that had captured him. He rode his horse, followed the direction of the wind, and returned to the wide plains of the steppe. Every step was a victory, every breath a lesson. He was no longer alone, for the steppe and all the hardships he had endured had guided him. The silence of the steppe, the melody of the wind, the rustle of grasses, all nurtured the seeds of leadership within Temujin. He was not yet a Khan, nor had he founded an empire. But this solitude, this struggle, and this silence were preparing his mind and spirit. And so, young Temujin quietly grew stronger in the depths of the steppe, preparing to take the first steps toward establishing one of the greatest empires in history. Chapter 5. The Bond with Kamuha and Loyalty on the Steppe. The steppe was a silent teacher. Vast plains, endless grasslands, and gently swaying shrubs. Every stone, every hillock, every whisper of the wind carried a lesson. As days, weeks, and months passed,
Temujin grew into a young man, maturing through all the hardships he had endured. During this time, the person he spent the most time with was his childhood friend, Kamuha. Kamuha came from an aristocratic family and had earned the respect of the leaders of his tribe. Yet during their hours spent together on the steppe at a young age, a quiet bond had formed between him and Temujin. This bond grew stronger with the silent and deep rhythm of the steppe, teaching them new trust and loyalty every day.
Every morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Temujin and Kamuha mounted their horses and quietly roamed the wide plains. The wind tossed their hair, the soft rustle of the grasses reached their ears, and the hooves struck the ground with slow but determined beats. This silence created an unspoken understanding between them. Words were unnecessary. Glances, breaths, and small gestures communicated each other's intentions and thoughts.
Being present in the moment was essential on the steppe. Noticing minor conflicts between tribes, observing the behavior of animals, sensing approaching rain clouds from the direction of the wind. All of these quietly taught young Temujin and Kamuha lessons in leadership and survival. Every step, every breath, every glance carried strategy and knowledge. Being beside Kamuha was both a source of security and a challenge for Temujin. Kamuha, from an aristocratic background, sometimes acted proud and haughty, but on the steppe, atop their horses, sharing the silence, all differences slowly faded. Understanding each other's actions, reading the silence, and moving together. This was the foundation of true loyalty and friendship.
One day, in a wide plain, Temujin and Kamuha stopped beside a cluster of stones. The wind gently swayed the grasses, and distant mountains were shrouded in mist. Kamuha silently looked at Temujin and slightly nodded his head. This small gesture was a quiet way of saying, "I am here, you can trust me." Temujin nodded in return, for the steppe itself taught the deepest meaning of friendship without words.
Through days and nights, they hunted together, observed animals, and shared the secrets of the steppe. Kamuha saw the growing determination in Temujin's eyes. Temujin learned from Kamuha that leadership was shaped not only by strength, but also by loyalty and trust. The silence of the steppe offered a new lesson each day. The rustle of the grasses, the quiet shadows of distant mountains, the melodies of far-off tribes carried by the wind. All of these built a repository of knowledge in Temujin's mind and spirit. And Kamuha's presence reinforced this knowledge, creating a silent sense of security.
Yet the steppe was not only peace and silence. The quiet movements of enemy tribes, unexpected storms, hunger and cold, all of these tested young Temujin and Kamuha. Every hardship strengthened their friendship, teaching them to act together and trust each other. One evening, as they sat around the fire, the sky slowly filled with stars. The wind blew lightly, and the smoke from the fire rose into the sky. Kamuha silently sat beside Temujin. Without a word, they watched the fire together. Silence was stronger than words, for the steppe itself conveyed the meaning of friendship and loyalty.
This silence left a deep mark on Temujin's spirit. Having a friend he could trust on the steppe became a quiet part of his leadership skills. One day, perhaps very soon, This trust and loyalty would become a force uniting the tribes. And through this bond with Kamuha, Temujin quietly learned the first lessons of becoming a future Khan.
Riding silently across the wide plains, lying under the stars, and listening to the melody of the wind, the strength within Temujin slowly grew. This strength was not only physical, but also the quiet foundation of a spiritual and mental leader. And silence, friendship, and loyalty became the silent yet resolute stones that would build his future great empire.
Chapter 6. Marriage to Borte and her abduction. The steppe awoke once again to a silent morning. The sun slowly rose behind the horizon, casting golden and silver light over snow-covered hills and endless plains. The wind gently swayed the grasses, and the quiet flow of rivers beyond distant mountains set the rhythm of the steppe. Every breath carried the melody of the earth and sky, and every step offered a silent lesson. Young Temujin had now grown into a mature young man, shaped by the harshness of the steppe. He had learned to ride, hunt, understand war strategies, and read the clues of the wind and sky. But life was not only about harsh lessons. Within the steppe, he also had to discover the soft and fragile sides of the human spirit.
It was at this time that Borte appeared. Borte was like a point of balance amidst the harsh landscape of the steppe, with her beauty and calm demeanor. She touched not only Temujin's heart, but also his spirit. At first sight, the young man felt a connection, a quiet yet profound bond. Borte's presence added softness and tranquility to the stern melody of the steppe. Days, weeks, and months passed. Temujin and Borte spent time together, speaking quietly and sharing the silence of the steppe. Every glance, every smile was like a silent understanding. On the steppe, words were sometimes unnecessary. The sound of the wind, the rustling of hooves, the light of the sky, all of these conveyed their emotions.
But the steppe did not bring only peace. Enemy tribes approached quietly, but with determination. One night, as darkness fell, Borte was abducted. Temujin's heart froze. Even the melody of the silent wind seemed to stop at that moment. His breath quickened atop his horse, and the sound of hooves struck the ground like a heavy rhythm. The silence of the steppe suddenly became sharp and frightening. Throughout the night, Temujin rode tirelessly, following the direction of the wind, trying to pick up clues from the rustling grasses. Every step was a lesson, every breath a struggle. The patience and observation he had learned as a child now became vital to saving his life and his loved one.
The wide plains, silent shadows, and distant mountains, each seemed to offer a silent path. The soft breeze of the wind, the rustle of distant trees, the scent of the earth, everything was a sign, a guidance, and a warning. Temujin approached the enemy tribe quietly and decisively. Every move was calculated, every gaze attentive. Silence had become his greatest ally. Unnoticed by the enemy, Temujin advanced silently. As the hooves lightly touched the ground, a power and determination grew in his heart.
Finally, upon reaching the enemy camp, silence and resolve merged. Temujin noticed the carelessness of the enemies and swiftly, silently found Borte. Borte looked at him with a gaze caught between fear and hope. A silent glance spoke louder than any words. "You are safe." Rescuing Borte was not merely a physical victory, it was also a silent lesson, a test of strategy and leadership. The silent melody of the steppe, the whispers of the wind, and the rhythm of the hooves. All these created a power within Temujin, shaping him not just as a young man, but as the future Khan.
Riding back across the wide plains under the night's silence, the bond between Temujin and Berte grew even stronger. Silence had become not only the voice of the steppe, but also the voice of their mutual trust and loyalty. The steppe, with its harsh and vast face, offered a setting where love and leadership converged. And so young Temujin walked across the steppe not only as a warrior. He was a young man who had learned the lessons of loyalty, trust, and silent leadership. Every step, the direction of the wind, the rustle of grasses, and the quiet melody of the sky whispered to him the building blocks of his future great empire.
Chapter 7: Temujin's First Great Battle and the Struggle with Rival Tribes. The steppe was a silent yet vigilant teacher. The horizon shimmered with gold and silver light. Snow-covered hills and endless plains moved in harmony with the gentle rustle of the wind. Every stone, every mound, every whisper of grass seemed to tell a story. And those stories were recorded silently in Temujin's young and determined mind as lessons of observation, patience, and strategy. Every breath atop his horse, every movement of the wind, the silhouette of distant mountains, all were quiet clues of war and survival.
Rival tribes had grown uneasy with Temujin's increasing power. They plotted silently, manipulated allied tribes, and staged secret attacks across different corners of the steppe. But Temujin, no longer merely a young boy, was now an observant leader. He calculated each movement, evaluated every sound, the direction of every breeze, the rustle of every blade of grass. One day, the attacks of rival tribes became inevitable. Dust clouds rose on the horizon, and the distant sound of galloping hooves began to break the silence. The entire tribe prepared in tense quiet. Women and children were guided to safety. Elders organized the young warriors silently, every step planned with precision. The steppe itself seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the storm.
Temujin stood atop his horse, eyes fixed on the horizon. The dust and subtle sounds carried by the wind silently revealed the movements of his enemies. Every breath was a calculation, every glance a strategy. The young leader meditated silently on the fate of his tribe, forming his plan in quiet resolve. When the battle began, silence rang sharply across the steppe like a piercing cry. The hooves of horses struck the earth with heavy force. Arrows flew silently but lethally. Temujin directed his forces with calm determination, quietly observing the mistakes of the enemy tribes. Every movement, every decision flowed in a rhythm akin to meditation. Silence had become his greatest ally.
On the wide plains of the steppe, the battle unfolded like a dance. Horses charged swiftly, arrows carried a silent melody of death. Tribes clashed, silent cries and distant enemy shouts echoing across the steppe. But Temujin, using the wind, the earth, and the quiet, gained a strategic advantage. Each move distracted the enemies while protecting his own people. In the midst of the battle, Temujin's eyes spotted an opportunity on the horizon. The enemy leader had made a strategic mistake. This silent error spoke to Temujin like the subtle melody of the steppe. With a swift and quiet maneuver, he pierced the enemy's lines, increasing the advantage of his own tribe.
Every action was a demonstration of silent but unmistakable power.
The battle continued throughout the day. As the sun slowly moved across the vast plains, the rhythm of horses' breaths, the silent flight of arrows, and the focused efforts of people merged into a unified cadence. Temujin followed this rhythm, quietly identifying the weak points of the enemy tribes. Every moment of silence became a strategy and a lesson. As the sun set, the steppe returned to quietude. Enemy tribes had dispersed, and the tribe's people slowly gathered around the fires. Temujin dismounted silently, listening to the quiet melody of the steppe, the rustle of the grass, the whispers of the wind, the shadows of distant mountains. All reminded him that this victory was only the beginning.
When night fell, the stars filled the sky. Temujin sat quietly by the fire, absorbing the steppe's melody and silence. Each star reminded him of the duties of a future great leader. Each breath imparted a silent lesson in patience and determination. It was this silence and struggle that built strength in Temujin's mind and spirit. Every battle, every silent observation, every careful step, all were laying the foundations quietly that would make him a future Khan and the founder of one of the world's greatest empires. And the steppe, vast and silent, watched the young Temujin's steps. Every breeze, every rustle of grass, every mountain silhouette whispered to him the silent and profound lessons of leadership.
Chapter 8. Temujin's first great victory and ascension as Khan. The steppe awoke to a silent and boundless morning. The sun rose slowly from beyond the horizon, spreading its golden and silver light over snow-covered hills. The wind gently stirred the grasses, and the shadows of distant mountains accompanied the quiet melody of the steppe. Every stone, every mound, every whisper of the wind carried a lesson, sketching a silent map of strategy in Temujin's mind. The young Temujin was no longer just a young man. He had become a warrior, taking firm steps toward leading his tribe. Berta's loyalty, the bond he had forged with Jamuha, and the silent teachings of the steppe had shaped his character. Every victory, every loss, every struggle quietly accumulated deep strength within Temujin's spirit.
Rival tribes feared Temujin's growing power. In the silent depths of the steppe, they planned, manipulated each other, and prepared for quiet battles. But Temujin had already heard these whispers, quietly evaluating every movement. Every breath atop his horse, every horizon he scanned with his eyes, every subtle clue carried by the wind. Each was a sign, a silent guide. Finally, Temujin faced a vast plain where the rival tribes had united. The wide fields, gently waving grasses, and distant mountain shadows resembled a silent theater stage. The tribes took their positions in quiet tension. The rustle of the wind, the breathing of horses created a delicate suspense. Every gaze, every breath, every movement became a combination of strategy and patience.
Throughout the day, the battle unfolded as a silent struggle. Arrows flew with the silent melody of death. Horses' hooves struck the ground in rhythmic pulses, and as the tribes approached each other, the sounds carried by the wind informed Temujin of every detail. Silence had become his greatest ally, for he could observe the mistakes of enemy tribes quietly. As hours passed, Temujin's strategy began to take effect. Enemy lines faltered,
and panic quietly spread. Every maneuver, every silent step ensured the safety of his tribe and gradually broke the morale of his foes. Across the vast plains, the battle flowed like a silent rhythm, each moment a lesson, each moment a preparation for victory.
As the sun set, Temujin and his tribe quietly encircled the enemy. The horizon glowed with crimson and gold, and the steppe was filled with a solemn grandeur. Horses panted heavily, the people were weary but resolute. And then the silent moment arrived. The enemy tribes surrendered. Temujin dismounted quietly. He gazed at the horizon, the whispers of the wind, the rustle of the grasses, the silent shadows of the distant mountains. All of it spoke to him. You are now a leader. You are a Khan. Borta and Kamuha stood silently by his side. Silence became a melody celebrating their trust and the greatness of Temujin's leadership.
As night fell, stars filled the sky. Temujin sat quietly by the fire, listening to the melody of the steppe. Each star was a silent witness to his victory, each breath a silent lesson in patience and determination. The steppe had acknowledged his leadership, offering a quiet affirmation. And so, the young Temujin rose in the steppe not only as a warrior, but as a Khan who had learned silence, patience, strategy, and leadership. Every step, every rustle of the grass, every whisper of the wind, every silent melody of the sky, all continued to lay the foundations of the great empire he would one day build. The silence of the steppe had now become the silent melody of Temujin's power, leadership, and vision. Every breath, every step, every gaze promised a future to himself and his tribe. And under the stars, in that quiet, Temujin's first great victory and his ascension as Khan were complete.
Chapter 9: The Rise of the Empire and the Unification of the Mongols. The steppe awoke to the quiet of dawn. The horizon was illuminated with golden and silver light. Snow-covered hills and boundless plains trembled to the gentle melody of the wind. The rustle of grasses, the shadows of distant mountains, and the silent flow of rivers created a quiet symphony across the steppe. Every stone, every shrub, every breeze carried a lesson, a sign, a silent message. And this silence was shaping a map of strategy, a book of leadership within the mind of young Temujin.
Khan Temujin was no longer merely the leader of his own tribe. He was a leader with his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, dreaming of uniting the entire Mongol steppe. Berta and Kamaha stood by him in silent support, and the stillness of the steppe gave him strength. Every day, every step, every glance combined with the lessons of the land, shaping Temujin's vision. Rival tribes still quietly plotted, manipulated one another, and prepared for silent conflicts. But Temujin was no longer just a young Khan. He was a strategist, an observer, and a leader. Intertribal meetings, silent negotiations, the fine line between friendship and enmity, all of it merged with the quiet melody of the steppe, forming a complex map within Temujin's mind. The Khan first formed alliances with nearby tribes in a quiet but decisive manner. Every meeting was a lesson in silent diplomacy. Words were few, silence long and full of meaning. Eyes, gestures, the rustle of grasses, the direction of the wind, all symbolized agreement and trust.
Over the days, weeks, and months, Temujin established a silent yet powerful authority among the tribes. Small disputes, quiet whispers, and warnings from the deep steppe, each strengthened his leadership abilities and sharpened his strategic mind. And slowly, silently, the tribes began to unite. Enmity gave way to trust, and fragmented groups transformed into a single, cohesive community. Across the vast plains, Temujin's army grew quietly but decisively. Horses' hooves struck the ground in rhythmic pulses, and arrows flew silently but with deadly speed. Every battle, every silent observation, every careful step strengthened the foundations of the emerging empire. Khan Temujin merged the silent melody of the steppe with the art of leadership and strategy.
One day, a distant tribe decided to challenge Temujin's growing power. They launched a quiet attack. The breath of horses, the silent flight of arrows, the muted cries of the enemy echoed across the steppe. But Temujin remained calm and resolute. He read the wind, smelled the earth, and interpreted the silent clues from animals and people, implementing his strategy silently but decisively. The battle lasted for hours. Every breath, every step, every glance was part of a strategy. The speed of the horses, the sound of the wind, the shadows of distant mountains, all moved like silent guides across Temujin's mental map. Finally, the enemy tribes surrendered, and the steppe was filled with the silent melody of victory.
After the triumph, Temujin gathered all Mongol tribes together. On the wide plains atop horses, he stood silently but resolutely. The breeze, the melody of the steppe, the quiet light of the stars in the sky, all symbolized the silent approval of the uniting Mongol tribes. Khan Temujin was now more than a leader. He was a founder of an empire, forged in silence, strengthened by strategy, and supported by loyalty and trust. Berta's fidelity, his bond with Kamucha, the trust of the tribes, all of these formed the silent but solid cornerstones of his leadership. As night fell, stars blanketed the sky. Temujin sat quietly by the fire, listening to the silent melody of the steppe. Every breath was a quiet lesson in patience and determination. Every glance, a silent sign of leadership. Every whisper of the wind, a reminder reinforcing the foundations of the empire. And so Khan Temujin, united with the silence and vastness of the steppe, established the Mongol Union. Every tribe, every leader, every person was brought together by his strategy and determination. The quiet melody of the steppe was no longer just a natural landscape. It had become the silent witness of Temujin's vision, leadership, and empire.
Chapter 10. The Expansion of the Empire and the Battles that Made History. The steppe awoke once again to a silent morning. The horizon was filled with golden, silver, and pastel hues. The gently blowing wind swayed the grasses softly, and distant mountains stood like silent silhouettes over the plains. Every stone, every hill, every breeze carried a lesson, a sign, a story. And this silence, in the mind of Khan Temujin, was no longer just a landscape. It was a map of strategy, a book of leadership and history. All the Mongol tribes had united, forming a silent but solid alliance. Temujin's gaze was no longer only on protecting his own tribe. It was on uniting the entire steppe, the rivers, valleys, and distant tribes to establish a secure empire. Every day, every wind, every rustle of grass, every star offered him quiet guidance. He heard the voice of the spirit of the blue sky everywhere.
Across the vast plains, Khan Temujin silently organized his army. Every warrior, every horse, every arrow moved in a quiet rhythm, as if in harmony with the melodies of the wind and the grasses. Rival tribes feared Temujin's growing power, quietly forming alliances and manipulating one another. But Temujin was no longer a young Khan. He was a leader who had internalized strategy and leadership, acting with quiet wisdom. The first major objective was to bring a powerful northern tribe under control. On a silent night, Temujin prepared his army, observing the direction of the wind, the composition of the soil, and the behavior of the animals to craft a plan. Every step was a silent strategy, every breath a lesson in determination. Each member of his army, like a note in the quiet rhythm of the steppe, moved in perfect harmony with Temujin's plan.
When the battle began, the silence of the steppe became a sharp melody. Arrows flew silently, but with deadly precision. Horses' hoofs struck the ground in rhythmic beats, and the warriors advanced with quiet but determined discipline. Temujin climbed a high hill to observe the enemy lines silently. Every movement, every sound, every shift in the wind revealed the enemy's weaknesses. For hours, the battle continued in a silent rhythm. The horses' breaths, the flight of arrows, the quiet cries of the enemy, and the echo of distant mountains, all served as clues that strengthened Temujin's strategic mind. Finally, the enemy tribe surrendered quietly. The steppe was filled with the melody of a silent victory.
This first great triumph solidified Temujin's leadership. But the Khan did not stop. He turned his eyes east and west, new lands and tribes silently awaiting his plans. Every step, every decision, every maneuver merged with the quiet melody of the steppe, reinforcing the foundations of the empire. Eastern tribes, fearful of the Mongol army's strength, resisted quietly. Temujin chose the path of diplomacy. Silent meetings, eye contact, and gestures forged agreements. Tribes gradually united, enmity giving way to trust. Silence was no longer merely a natural environment. It had become a tool for leadership and diplomacy.
As they advanced westward, Temujin's army faced new challenges: mountain passes, rivers, and enemy forces across the vast plains. Every obstacle tested his strategic skill, yet the quiet rhythm of the steppe and the lessons he had learned guided him at every move. The speed of horses, the direction of the wind, the shadows of distant mountains, every step offered a sign. Every victory was completed with a silent celebration. When the stars filled the sky, Temujin sat by the fire, listening to the melody of the steppe. Every breath, every step, every glance became a quiet confirmation of his leadership and strategy. And silence was no longer merely a natural phenomenon. It had become the silent story of the Mongol Empire, its leader and its people.
Over time, Temujin's leadership and victories spread across every corner of Mongol lands. Tribes united, enemies surrendered quietly, and silence and discipline became the rhythm forming the foundation of the empire.
The steppe, with its vastness and quiet, transformed into a stage that supported Temujin's vision, strength, and strategic genius. Every day, every wind, every rustle of grass, every star whispered quietly to Khan Temujin. When strength is combined with patience and strategy, not only tribes, but entire steppes take shape in the hand of a leader. And thus the Mongol Empire rose on the historical stage through Temujin's determination, strategy, and silent leadership. Every battle, every victory, every moment of silence strengthened the empire's foundations. The silent melody of the steppe had become the quiet, yet profound and enduring story of a leader, a people, and an empire.
Chapter 11: The Governance System and Laws of the Mongol Empire. The steppe awoke to the silent calm of morning. The horizon was bathed in golden, silver, and pastel hues. The wind gently swayed the grasses, and distant mountains cast quiet shadows across the plains. Every stone, every hill, every breeze carried a lesson, a sign, a story. And this silence, in the mind of Khan Temujin, was no longer just a natural landscape. It had become a blueprint for an empire, a map of governance and organization.
Temujin was no longer merely a warrior or a unifier of tribes. He had become the silent yet powerful ruler of the Mongol Empire. Victories, the unification of tribes, and expanding territories were all proof of his leadership. But a true Khan was not only skilled in war, he had to be equally adept in peace and in establishing order. To strengthen the foundations of the empire, Temujin first established a system of justice and laws. The yasa echoed across the steppe as a silent force. Each rule, each regulation reinforced trust among the tribes and solidified the authority of their Khan. The justice system protected both the strong and the weak, establishing balance amidst the vast silence of the steppe.
Members of each tribe quickly recognized the fairness and comprehensiveness of Temujin's laws. Theft, betrayal, disorder, all were punished with quiet but decisive discipline, weaving a silent authority across the wide plains. The laws were not merely a tool for punishment, they were a means to ensure social trust and unity. The Khan actively involved tribal leaders and advisors in the governance process. Every decision was shaped through silent meetings and careful observation. Eye contact, gestures, quiet agreements, all reflected the deep and silent art of leadership and administration. Temujin listened carefully to every voice and thought, quietly developing his strategies in the silence of the steppe.
The expansion of the Mongol Empire was achieved not only through war, but through quiet diplomacy and strategies of unification. All tribes came together under Temujin's determination and fair governance. Each tribe learned to trust one another in silence. Each leader came to appreciate the Khan's silent strength and wisdom-filled strategies. To maintain order, the Khan coordinated both military and civil organization. Armies prepared silently and with discipline. Each warrior represented not only a weapon, but also a symbol of strategy and discipline. Civil administration ensured peace and order across the vast plains. The entire system operated like a silent symphony, a reflection of Temujin's leadership.
Every morning, as Temujin walked through the silent plains, the rustling of the grass, the shadows of distant mountains, and the quiet melody of the steppe inspired his governance.
Which tribe should be approached in which way? Which agreements were a priority? Which challenges could be resolved quietly? All of this was shaped in his mind with silent but profound strategic thought. Across the wide plains, Temujin's silent leadership was now felt by all tribes. Every step, every glance, every decision was a cornerstone safeguarding the empire's security, unity, and peace. And silence was no longer just a natural phenomenon. It had become governance, order, a Khan, and the quiet yet powerful melody of an empire.
As night fell and stars filled the sky, Temujin sat quietly by the fire, merging with the vastness and silence of the steppe. Every breath was a quiet indication of leadership. Every glance reflected strategy and justice. Every whisper of the wind carried a message quietly strengthening the foundations of the Mongol Empire. And thus, Khan Temujin became not merely a warrior. He became a Khan and ruler of the Mongol Empire, combining silence, patience, strategy, justice, and leadership. Every tribe, every leader, every individual acknowledged his silent but powerful authority. The quiet melody of the steppe had become the enduring, deep, and silent story of an empire, its people, and its leader.
Chapter 12: The Culture and Social Order of the Mongol Empire. The steppe awoke to the quiet of morning. The horizon was illuminated in shades of gold and silver, the gently blowing wind swaying the grasses, and distant mountains casting silent shadows across the plains. Every stone, every hill, every breeze carried traces of a culture that the Mongol people had maintained silently yet profoundly for thousands of years. And this silence, within Khan Temujin's empire, was not just a natural landscape, it had become a guide for social order and cultural life.
Across the vast plains, tribes lived in quiet harmony. Everyone had a role, herding their animals, protecting their homes, educating children, maintaining fires and tents. The quiet rhythm of these daily tasks created discipline and order that formed the foundation of the empire. Every breath, every step, every glance silently preserved the organization of Mongol society. Children learned to ride horses and use bows from an early age. Across the silent plains, the young raced their horses with the wind, felt the melody of the grasses and soil, and grew up within a quiet discipline. This training did not merely develop physical skills, it also taught patience, observation, and lessons in leadership.
Women played quiet but powerful roles. Managing households, educating children, preparing food, and caring for livestock. Every task was performed with silent discipline, ensuring the continuation of social order. The silent strength of women was one of the foundational pillars that reinforced the social fabric of the empire. Women like Borte stood alongside the Khan as both advisors and supporters. Silence strengthened their wisdom and strategic insight. The Khan quietly utilized this support, applying it for the welfare of the people and the unity of the empire.
The social order among tribes relied on quiet but firm rules. Theft, betrayal, disorder, all were prevented with silent but decisive discipline, and peace and order were maintained by the steppe's quiet rhythm. The people trusted the Khan's laws, feeling the silent but effective power of justice.
Across the expansive plains, people communicated with each other silently but meaningfully. Eye contact, gestures, quiet agreements. This silence was a cornerstone of Mongol culture. Words were sometimes insufficient, and attentiveness and quietness became the most powerful means of communication.
Food and survival were organized in a silent rhythm. Herding animals, preparing milk and meat, making winter provisions. Every task required patience and care, carried out in harmony with the steppe's quiet rhythm. This discipline and harmony were crucial for the expansion and stability of the empire.
Festivals and rituals were also conducted with quiet, natural harmony. The rising of the moon, the direction of the wind, the position of the stars, all created meaningful moments and energy for the community, with silence enhancing the depth of cultural rituals. Every dance, every song, every silent meditation reinforced the unity and loyalty of the people. The steppe's quietness allowed each individual to recognize their role and duties. Children observed in silence, youth gained experience, elders passed on wisdom, and leaders quietly planned strategy. This silence formed the fundamental melody of Mongol culture and social order.
Khan Temujin observed and guided all this silent rhythm. Every tribe, every family, every individual felt his leadership and cultural guidance. The quiet of the steppe shaped their daily life and social organization. As night fell and stars filled the sky, the Khans sat quietly by the fire, listening to the silent melody of the steppe. Every breath was a quiet sign of leadership. Every glance, a silent affirmation of social order and culture. Every whisper of the wind acted as a guide for the Mongol people and the empire.
And thus, the Mongol Empire became not only mighty in war, it also became a silent but powerful empire through culture, social order, tradition, and daily life. The quiet melody of the steppe had become not only a natural landscape, but the silent, deep, and enduring story of a people, a leader, and a culture.
Chapter 13: Diplomacy and Trade Routes of the Mongol Empire. The steppe whispered a quiet melody with the first light of morning. The horizon was filled with shades of gold and silver, the gentle wind swaying the grasses, and distant mountains casting silent shadows across the vast plains. Every stone, every hill, every breeze carried traces not only of the Mongol Empire's physical power, but also of the silent yet solid relationships it built through diplomacy and trade. And this silence, in Khan Temujin's mind, was not just a landscape. It had become a map of strategy and diplomacy.
The Mongol Empire expanded not only through war, but also through silent diplomacy and strategic relationships. Khan Temujin placed great importance on diplomacy, choosing observation and careful agreements with every tribe, city, and trade center. Every meeting, every letter, every message relied on silent strategy. Words were brief, but their meaning ran deep. Diplomatic relations had become an art combining silence and observation. Temujin read every gaze, gesture, posture, and quiet movement of the leaders he met, shaping agreements based on these subtle cues. The quiet melody of the steppe strengthened his strategic thinking, allowing him to assess the impact of each decision silently.
Trade routes were among the cornerstones of the empire's power and wealth. The Silk Road and other steppe routes pulsed like the heart of the Mongol Empire, providing a silent but continuous flow. Merchants, caravans, and their animals, combined with the rhythmic sound of hooves and the scents carried by the wind, created the quiet rhythm of commerce. Every cargo, every caravan strengthened the empire's economic power and diplomatic relations. Khan Temujin took quiet but effective measures to secure the trade and diplomatic routes. Lookouts, route security, agreements, caravan protection.
Every step provided silent order and peace, ensuring the continuity of trade and diplomatic relations.
Diplomacy was conducted through silent agreements and symbolic gestures. A handshake, an emblem, a delivered gift, all carried silent but profound messages, reinforcing trust and cooperation between tribes and cities. Through these silent strategies, Temujin's leadership protected and expanded the empire. A silent balance was established among tribes, cities, and trade centers. Everyone knew their role. Every individual and leader felt the order within the silence and acted accordingly. The vast steppe, the quiet rhythm of distant cities, and the constant movement along trade routes allowed the empire to form a strong and sustainable system.
Temujin used the power of silence in meetings and negotiations with distant cities and tribes. Every gaze, every gesture, every quiet stance was part of the diplomatic message. And silence was often more effective than words, as trust, respect, and understanding were quietly established. Every caravan, every trade cargo, every diplomatic agreement strengthened the foundations of the empire. Every silent step ensured the continuity of peace and security. The quiet melody of the steppe had become more than just a natural landscape. It had become the silent but powerful story of an empire shaped by diplomacy, trade, and peace. As night fell and stars filled the sky, Khan Temujin sat quietly by the fire, listening to the silent melody of the steppe. Every breath was a quiet sign of diplomacy and trade. Every glance, a silent confirmation of leadership and strategy. Every whisper of the wind carried a message quietly strengthening the empire's economic and diplomatic power.
And thus, the Mongol Empire rose on the historical stage not only through war and leadership, but also through diplomacy, trade, and silent strategy. The quiet melody of the steppe now echoed as the deep, enduring, and silent story of an empire, a people, and a leader.
Chapter 14. The Mongol Empire's Military Tactics and Strategies. The steppe awoke to the silence of morning. The horizon was bathed in golden and silver light, the wind gently swaying the grasses, and distant mountains casting silent shadows across the vast plains. Every stone, every hill, every breeze carried not only the traces of the Mongol Empire's expanding lands, but also the marks of military tactics and strategies that would leave a lasting impact on world history. And this silence, in Khan Temujin's mind, was not just a landscape. It became a map of the art of war and strategy.
The Mongol army was organized with silent discipline and harmony. Every horse, every arrow, every warrior moved within the rhythm planned by Temujin. Silence became the strongest element of strategy. Each member of the army was equipped not only with physical strength, but also with attention, patience, and keen observation. The quiet of the steppe sharpened their tactical intelligence, turning every move into a silent strategy.
One of Temujin's most effective tactics was surprise and rapid maneuvers. Enemies felt a silent unease while observing the movements of the Mongol army and were forced to reconsider their plans. The Khan silently evaluated the wind's direction, the terrain, the speed of the horses, and the enemy's reactions. Each piece of information became a quiet guide for the next move. Simulations and silent observations across the wide steppe formed the foundation of battle strategy. Training within the army took place in silence. Archers, cavalry, and infantry gained the discipline to move without needing direct commands from their Khan. Every breath, every glance, every step was a strategic lesson.
When battle began, the Mongol army moved like a silent melody of death. Arrows flew silently but lethally through the air. Cavalry executed quiet yet devastating attacks across the open plains. The enemy could not anticipate the direction of the strike. Panic spread quietly, and their formations broke. This silent chaos, combined with the disciplined and coordinated movements of Temujin's army, resonated across the steppe as the silent melody of victory. The Khan climbed a high hill to observe the battlefield quietly. The direction of the wind, the texture of the ground, gaps in the enemy lines, the speed of the horses, all were silent signals guiding the next move. Every maneuver was like a chess move. Silence and attention were the strongest allies of victory.
Hours of conflict demonstrated the discipline and strategic prowess of the Mongol army. Cavalry silently surrounded enemy lines. Archers unleashed a quiet rain of death with the wind. Infantry advanced silently but resolutely. Finally, the enemy tribes surrendered silently. The steppe was filled with the melody of victory. Temujin's tactics were effective not only on the battlefield, but also psychologically. Through silent marches, empty camps, footprints left unseen, and quiet nighttime observations, the Khan undermined the enemy's morale, instilling silent fear and admiration. Every strategic move was quiet yet effective. The enemy surrendered without fully understanding the power of the Mongol army.
Across the silent plains, Temujin's army grew stronger, more disciplined, and more cohesive with each new battle. Every training, every observation, every silent march laid the foundation for the next victory. And silence was no longer just a natural phenomenon. It had become the silent yet powerful melody of the Mongol Empire's military tactics and strategies. As night fell and stars filled the sky, the Khan sat quietly by the fire, listening to the silent melody of the steppe. Every breath was a quiet sign of leadership and strategy. Every glance, a silent affirmation of military tactics and discipline. Every whisper of the wind carried a message silently strengthening the empire's military power.
And thus, the Mongol Empire left its mark on world history, not only on the battlefield, but as a force combined with strategy, tactics, discipline, and silence. The quiet melody of the steppe now echoed as the silent, profound, and enduring story of an empire, an army, and a leader.
Chapter 15: The Legacy and Historical Impact of the Mongol Empire. The steppe awoke to the silence of morning. The horizon glowed with shades of gold, silver, and pastels, the wind gently swaying the grasses, and distant mountains casting silent shadows across the plains. Every stone, every hill, every breeze carried the deep marks left by the Mongol Empire over the centuries. And this silence whispered that the empire founded by Khan Temujin was not merely a physical power, but also a map of history, culture, and legacy. Over time, the Mongol Empire expanded, unified, and later began to fragment due to various factors. Yet every piece of land, every tribe, every city retained a silent memory of Temujin's leadership, strategy, and vision. The silent melody of the steppe was no longer just a natural landscape. It had become a quiet yet powerful witness to the historical, cultural, and social legacy of an empire.
The fall of the Mongol Empire unfolded as a silent transformation. Wars, divisions, and political changes reshaped the once vast borders of the empire. Yet this process brought with it the silent but profound lessons of history.
the vision of a leader, a disciplined people, and quiet yet determined strategies left enduring marks on the stage of history. Cultural influences persisted even after the empire's decline. Trade routes, silent agreements forged by diplomats, and the foundations of social order all remained as a quiet guide and legacy for future generations. The Mongol legal and administrative system was observed and studied by other civilizations, providing lessons and contributing to the formation of new societal structures over time.
The social structure and daily lifestyle of the Mongol people left a quiet impact on world history. Equestrian culture, disciplined living, silent forms of communication, and harmony with nature all were values admired and sometimes adopted by later civilizations. The silent melody of the steppe had become not only a teacher for the Mongol people, but also a quiet instructor for world history. Trade routes and diplomatic relations became one of the enduring aspects of the Mongol Empire's legacy. The Silk Road and other caravan paths facilitated cultural exchange and economic interaction, shaping world history. Every silent agreement, every secure route, and every trade connection ensured the empire's influence reached future generations.
Military strategy and battlefield tactics were studied and emulated for centuries. Mongol cavalry, archers, and disciplined armies transformed the understanding of warfare worldwide. Silence and observation were passed down as essential elements of leadership and strategy, not just in battle, but as a guiding principle for future generations. Khan Temujin's leadership and vision were examined not only in his own era, but also by historians, leaders, and strategists for thousands of years. Every silent step, every quiet decision strengthened the empire's legacy. The silent melody of the steppe echoed as the quiet teacher of world history.
As night fell and the stars filled the sky, the silence of the steppe became the quiet narrator of a legacy spanning centuries. Every breath was a silent sign of leadership and strategy. Every glance a quiet affirmation of cultural and social heritage. Every whisper of the wind a silent marker of the Mongol Empire's enduring influence, power, and wisdom throughout history. And thus, the Mongol Empire, through its victories, culture, laws, social order, and diplomacy, became a silent, profound, and lasting legacy in world history. The silent melody of the steppe now resonated as the quiet, deep, and enduring story of an empire, a people, a leader, and the history of humanity.
Closing. The silent legacy of the Mongol Empire. In the silence of the steppe, the story of the Mongol Empire, rising under the leadership of Genghis Khan, comes to an end. From its founding to its wars, from its laws to its culture, from trade routes to diplomacy, every step left a silent yet profound mark. This vast empire did more than conquer lands and people. It also became a quiet teacher of leadership, strategy, discipline, and culture throughout history. Now, as the stars spread across the steppe, listen to the silence. Every breeze, every stone, and every hill whispers the legacy of the Mongol Empire, reminding us of the silent, lasting marks it left on world history through its victories, culture, and strategic brilliance. And so, with the silent melody of the past, carrying this story from the depths of history in your mind, you can drift to sleep accompanied by the quiet rhythm of the steppe.